I think what I feel present to is the agitation that is on the planet right now. It feels to me like there's an anxiety and an irritability, and I see it both in our community and in the world. And I think what I've been navigating in myself is how do I move through the anxiety and the agitation and still be authentic to who I am here to be. And yesterday, John Carlos, when I heard you say that you were told that you were a troublemaker, and what I heard you invite us into was not to allow a label like that to dictate or determine or suppress who you are uniquely here to be on the planet. And I'm so grateful for that, because I have been told I was a troublemaker my whole life. And when we're breaking through into a new paradigm, into a new state of consciousness, you know, it's easy to want to kill off the voice that provokes discomfort. And yet I would argue that the voice that provokes discomfort is exactly what's needed to push through into the next place in space. If John Carlos had not honored the divine discontent that stirred in his soul, an entire conversation wouldn't have erupted on the planet the way it did. And so you could say that in some ways, he chose to take a bullet for the good of the group. You know, he chose to say, I'll put my life on the line so that, as you said yesterday, Bill Cosby can have the chance that he has. Oprah Winfrey can have the chance that she has. When someone like John Carlos comes along, and you'll read this in his book, The Story of John Carlos, which you can find, I'm sure, on Amazon, but he talks about the reverence and the celebration that he was given for his athleticism and how much entertainment value that provided for the American people. And then the moment he outed his perspective on the state of a nation, it was all sort of taken away. And he then found himself weeding, he found himself in menial work because nobody wanted to deal with him. When someone takes a risk like that to be authentically who they're here to be, it requires a presence and a stillness within one's soul that enables them to transcend all the noise of the day. There was a lot of noise when he made that choice. And if he had not had a deep and profound sense of stillness in his soul, he could not have weathered that storm. So I don't know what it is you're butting up against, what your growth edge is around what there is to be said on the planet, but it is not a time to go along to get along. It's a time to actually step into your power, your dominion, your authority, your conviction, your authenticity, your truth, and to trust that there is a power and a presence that is animating and amplifying your very being that always has your back, independent of the circumstances and conditions before you. So I want to bring your attention to a guy named Not Hahn. What a lot of people don't know about Not Hahn is that he was much like John Carlos. In 1966, he was a very loud voice on the planet in a Buddhist kind of way. And he was not having it with what was occurring with the Vietnam War. And in 1967, the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King nominated him for a Nobel Peace Prize. He is a Vietnamese Buddhist monk that, because of his position on the Vietnam War, was not allowed back into North Vietnam or South Vietnam. And he now has a monastery in France called Plum Village. And I think he's a great practitioner of what we're being called into in this time and space. He says, I shall practice looking deeply to see that the majority of my suffering arises from my ideas and perceptions. I shall not blame others when I suffer, but shall return to myself and recognize the source of my suffering in my misperceptions and my lack of deep understanding. What I believe Thich Nhat Hanh understands and what I believe John Carlos understands is that if they were to get caught up in their suffering, they couldn't be the powerful presence on the planet that they're here to be. So in fact, suffering is a very indulgent act. To be in the drama of your circumstances and conditions doesn't allow you to be the powerful presence that you're here to be. When we are attached to our misperceptions of rightness, we're taken out of the game. So this week I had the opportunity to participate in Chicago Ideas Week. And I kicked it off with a morning meditation on Monday. I led a panel on Thursday called Losing My Religion. And then I emceed the entire Chicago Ideas Day on Friday. And over the course of the week, I found myself in a number of homes that are owned and occupied by some of Chicago's ultra wealthy. I'm not talking about like a few $1 million. I'm talking about like hundreds of $1 million into the billions of dollars. And at one particular party, which was lovely, and there was an abundance of delicious sushi, there was this very peculiar moment for me. There were 8 fellows being honored for the work that they're doing on the planet. And the party was primarily white folks. And all but one, I think, of the fellows were people of color. And they were all fellows doing bodies of work to address the social ills of our day. And I was very struck by the irony of the moment. That in order for the kind of wealth that we were sitting among to exist, these social ills had to be in place. And so there was a celebratory moment that we are contributing to the resolution of these social ills when in fact our position in society requires these social ills to be in place. So if we are a teaching that understands that nothing occurs in isolation, then I found myself really struck by how these two bodies of work, the profound wealth and the devastating social issues, require each other. They must be together because you cannot have one without the other. Now, there's part of me that just wanted to start screaming. You know, I mean, Eileen's my date that night, and I'm like, where are we? What is happening right now? And I'm like, Lola, just breathe. Just breathe. Because one of the things that I'm profoundly or deeply committed to is to make a difference, to make an impact. And so if I indulge my rightness over my righteousness, if I indulge my suffering over my mission, I could have made a scene. And very little would have been accomplished. You talked, John Carlos, yesterday about the importance of the move you make. You talked about the game of chess, that in any given moment, you could act irrationally and dramatically, or you could step back and go, wait a second. Let me be strategic here. Let me be intentional here. Let me not be self-indulgent here. So what Thich Nhat Hanh says is, I shall practice looking deeply to see that the majority of my suffering arises from my ideas and perceptions. I shall not blame others when I suffer, because I could have stood there and really blamed the super wealthy for both my suffering and the social ills that were on display. And what would that have accomplished? Nothing. I would have enjoyed for a moment the opportunity of being right. And after that, nothing would change. So I know that what I'm tasked with at this point on the planet is to rest in the unknown. I have to rest in the idea that there's something greater happening here, and that I'm listening deeply to the still small voice that is leading, guiding, and directing me to my next move. What is mine to do? Because irrationality, dramatic response, doesn't change a thing. So I'd like you to just take a deep breath and close your eyes for a moment. And I'd love to have you bring to your mind's eye a concern on the planet at this time and space that troubles you. Perhaps it's an issue, perhaps it's a circumstance, perhaps it's an individual. Bring to your mind's eye a circumstance or a condition that is on the planet today that is troubling you. If you find yourself with a laundry list, just pick one. And go ahead and open your eyes, and I'd love for you to turn to someone near you, each with a turn, and say, without story, this is what's occurring on the planet that's troubling me. Would you go ahead and do that? All right, begin to bring your sharing to a close. And I'd love for you to take a deep breath again and close your eyes if that's comfortable for you. And at the level of the individual, what about this issue concerns you? What are you personally afraid of as it relates to this issue? Not, I am afraid for these people. No. Right where you are, at the level of the individual, what are you afraid of as it relates to this issue? Bring that to your mind's eye. See if you can notice it in your physical body. Around this issue, my personal fear or concern. Take a deep breath and open your eyes. And if you would, share with the same partner your personal fear or concern around that issue. All right. My experience is that oftentimes the issues of the day that can take up so much time and space and energy and emotion in our physical body are held outside of ourselves like concepts. And that there's great value in bringing it into who you are and how you are and as you are and seeing what is stirring in me. What is happening right here with me? We kicked off Foundations a couple of weeks ago, and what I love about that class is I'm always reminded of some of my early awakenings when I showed up at Bodhi 13 years ago. And one that you've heard me speak of before that is really just such a distillation of this practice was when I was taking a class called Financial Freedom. And we were working on a practice of affirmations. And, we were invited into the exploration that I am abundant. And the circumstances and conditions of my life were anything but the demonstration of abundance. I had, as many of you know, about $85,000 worth of debt. My monthly costs always exceeded my income. I had 2 little kids, and I was on this hamster wheel of lack and limitation. And the facilitator at the time asked us to be in a practice of affirming our abundance. And I just could not do it. As you know, I walked around with a big bag of bills, always hoping that somehow, sometime, somewhere, I would figure out what the solution was to this big bag of bills. And one day I found myself sitting at Bank of America where I worked, and I would obsessively look at my online banking, and I looked at my chronically overdrawn checking account, and all I could get to is, this is not the truth of who I am. This overdrawn checking account is not the truth of who I am. And I invite you into that right now, around whatever issue is occurring in you, that's disturbing you, that we are walking amidst on the planet. What is needed now more than ever are people who can keep asserting, this is not the truth of who we are. This is not the truth of who we are. I don't understand what the solution is. When I stood in that house Monday night and saw such the disturbance for me around ultra wealth and disturbing social issues, I don't have a solution in that moment. I don't know how to untangle or unravel us from this recurring experience of suffering. But what I can keep saying is, I know that this is not the truth of our being. I know that this is not the truth. And right now, that's all I got. And when I'm in that place of irritation and agitation, the only thing I really have access to is to rest in the unknown, to rest in the unseen. See, your egoic mind, the activity of the mind, will always look for what it knows. And it always needs to have a solution. It always needs to get somewhere. And it will get you into a more and more agitated place. So my invitation this week is to rest in the unknown, not as a form of spiritual bypass, not as a way of absolving oneself of personal responsibility, but in trusting that there is something greater going on here. There is an evolutionary impulse to life, and sometimes it looks like we're going backwards. But that is not the way the universe works. And as I said on Thursday at the MCA, in losing my religion, it may result in humanity self-destructing. That may happen. But if you know that your physical body is not the all of who you are, even that won't make you crazy. Like, would you be willing to consider that we are on a path of self-destruction? Would you be willing to consider that you are on a path of self-destruction? Because nothing's happening in the collective if it's not also happening on some level of your interior space. And so who would I need to be to rise up and live righteously, to not get stuck and mired in the drama of the day? See, John Carlos could have been taken out by the drama. But what I heard him say over and over and over again is he just kept moving forward. And he'd lift his foot, and the presence of God, as he knows it, would put another brick under it. And he'd lift his foot again, not knowing where he was going or how he was going to get there, but moving forward, and the presence would put another brick under him. That's where we are right now. Where in the world are we going? It looks really wild out there. But there is an evolutionary impulse. There is a power and presence that goes beyond the finite capacity to know and understand. See, we have been conditioned to believe that knowing is determined by our five senses. When what we know is oriented around that which meets the eye, we are resting in that which is finite or limited. However, when we look at our circumstances and conditions and realize there is a dimension to which we cannot know, we begin to rest in the infinite and the unseen, which is the unknown nature of life, and that is where mystery and creativity live. And in that place is where real peace, power, freedom, and joy are found. You don't have to know everything all the time. In fact, I would encourage you to lay down the attachment and the addiction to knowing. That is the Booby Prize. There is something greater going on here of which we cannot explain. Now, if you use that as a way of rolling over, you've missed the point. You have pressed into this dimension of reality with this stuff going on the planet. And as I have oftentimes said before, the great gift of Donald Trump is that if ever humanity needed to be reminded that you cannot outsource your security, approval, safety, control, and authority, now is the time. And so long as human beings are willing to wait for someone else like John Carlos to do the dirty work, we will remain in this loop, in this cycle, in this discomfort. So there's a really brilliant book called Stillness Speaks by Eckhart Tolle. And perhaps you know this man named Eckhart Tolle. He has a doppelganger. His name is my husband, Nathan Wright. I live with him. And so I hear his voice in my head all the time. In this book, Eckhart Tolle writes, "Surrender means giving up trying to understand and becoming comfortable with not knowing." There's a lot to not know right now. There is a lot that your mind will want to make sense of. But your mind is not where the solution resides. There's something more profound than your mind, and it's your soul. There is a unique appointment that you are here to serve on the planet at this time in history. There is an agitation that is occurring in the consciousness of humanity, and you can either contribute to that agitation or you can contribute to transcending the agitation into the realm of something new. There's enough agitation on the planet. Me shouting in that party would not have been the solution. So I join you in this game of chess. I join you in crafting my next move. I hope that you will be thoughtful around the issues that concern you and who you're here to be, not as a consumer of media, not as someone who requires entertainment, but someone who actually takes responsibility for the world that you want to live in. You know, you said something else yesterday. You said that the civil rights movement has largely been turned into blackface. That if you rely on the media to be your primary source of information, you will think that white people haven't been around in justice movements. And that's deliberate. That's intentional. That's crafted that way so that the locus of control or the focus of attention is on quote unquote marginalized populations. When I created Normal White People, the entire basis of that was to put forward white folks that are willing to do this work. Because if it rests on the shoulders of people who've been doing this work since the beginning of this country's time, nothing will change. So there is something very interesting occurring. And for those of us who can see beyond the agitation, your soul is called to participate. Your soul is called to contribute to the solution. I don't know what it is for you. But I'd love for us to go into a period of silent meditation right now. So I'd love to ask you to uncross your legs if that's comfortable for you. Sit up straight in your seat, shift a little bit. I wish that I was someone that could just come here and just talk about rainbows and unicorns. But I'm sorry, I cannot. I am not afraid of the discomfort that is occurring on the planet today. But we do have a responsibility to pay attention and see what's ours to do.